So, again, my name is Gwen Sorley, and we are going to be talking about the assessments today, tools that provide insight and direction. So, I know that many of you are here today because you have an area or maybe a few areas of concern. And you may be considering to getting an assessment in order to look at those areas a little bit closer. So, can you go ahead and type in the chat box? What are some of the areas you're concerned with currently and that you are considering an assessment for? Do you have a child who's struggling with academics? Do you have perhaps a client that is struggling with executive function? Maybe you yourself, as an adult, you might be having a hard time with productivity in the workplace. Go ahead and type in the chat box some of your responses of some of the areas that you are concerned with right now. Because as you type these areas of concern, and Jessica says she's concerned because she's having a hard time with relationships, okay? And Linda is having a hard time with emotion regulation. Good. John, ADHD and productivity. So you are all typing in certain areas that you're concerned with. And so you may think, well, do I really need an assessment? Because I already know I have a hard time with relationships, or perhaps I have a hard time with organization or procrastination. Maybe my child is having a hard time following through with multiple step instructions. So I know these areas are of concern. So I really need an assessment to confirm that? And that's an important question to ask because we really want to know our objective. If we are going to take an assessment, what is our objective at the end of the day? And really, our goal is to further evaluate our specific needs, or perhaps your child's specific needs, in order to determine a path. So, for example, David says he's looking at areas of procrastination, executive function, distraction, general productivity. Steph says she's looking at this for herself. She struggles with executive function, jump around too many tasks, ADHD, overwhelm, procrastination, great distraction as a dementia caregiver. Let's see. Arnold says I have clinical ADD. I am self-employed and doing well in business. I want to increase my executive function and perhaps areas you might bring up today. Excellent. Uh, Joyce says, is this hereditary? Grandmother, daughters, and two granddaughters all affected, first diagnosed in grandchildren. That, Joyce, is very common. You said very first person to be diagnosed was the grandchild. And then you may start looking at other family members and discovering, oh, that's why I've been struggling. A lot of times I'll hear from parents, I didn't know why I was struggling until my child was diagnosed, and then it all made sense. And Joyce, no one knows what causes ADHD, but it does seem to run in many families. So that is why you're seeing this with your grandmother, the granddaughters, and the daughter. So it is very common. But although all of you are struggling with ADHD, you know that everyone has very different strengths and weaknesses. So that's one of the importance of an assessment, because you all may have the same diagnosis, but your strengths and weaknesses are different. So we need to evaluate those in order to decide the best path for everyone. So if we look at, for example, let's see, who was saying David, who was saying procrastination is one area he's concerned with, and his general productivity. So he has these areas of concern. He has a goal in mind. He wants to improve his productivity, improve executive function, improve his ability to start tasks right away. So, which path does he take? Does he go down the middle, stay the course, do exactly what he's doing right now and hope for the best? Or does he take the path to the left, which may include some accommodations? Or does he take the path to the right, which may have some accommodations, but also specific cognitive skill building? So it's really important. An assessment can help us determine which path to take in order to reach our final destination, which for many of you, I think it was David typed in executive function, Arnold typed in executive function. So many of you, Deborah also stated executive function. So, for many of us here today, we know that our final destination, no matter what path we choose, the final destination is improved executive function. And it does seem that many of you are familiar with this. So, you know that executive function is kind of like the CEO of your brain. It's what allows you to control your attention, your behaviors, your emotions. It allows you to plan and prioritize, organize, avoid procrastination, and remain on task. These are a set of mental processes that we use every single day. However, they tend to be weakest for individuals with attention difficulties or ADHD. And there are very specific cognitive skills that need to be improved that lay the foundation for strong executive function. So, one of the ways we can determine which skills are weak and which skills need to be improved in order to improve or strengthen executive function, an assessment can actually help with that. So that is one of the goals. Assessments can provide a lot of great information regarding your strengths and also your weaknesses. It can define the problem areas specifically. It can indicate the severity of those weaknesses. And that's really critical because I talk to a lot of parents who will often say, well, I know my son has a hard time getting assignments done on time. Or I know my daughter is really impulsive. But is it a problem or is it eight just being eight, right? Is he having a hard time finishing assignments? But all 8-year olds have a hard time finishing assignments. So, by doing assessments, especially norm referenced assessments, it allows us to determine how severe it is, right? Is this an area of concern that we need to address? Or is this a pretty typical realm where kids are having difficulties or adults are having difficulties and you fall right in the norm? So it gives us an ability to look at the severity of these different areas. It allows us, as we've been discussing, to then develop a plan of action. Which path are we going to take? And it also provides a baseline to document progress. So when we're looking at a plan, no matter what plan you may take or which path you may take, you want to be able to look at progress over time to make certain that the plan is working or to know when to adjust that plan. So, for example, if you are looking to start play attention, we would typically do assessments prior to starting because that gives us not only the baseline, but helps us determine which exercises or which cognitive areas to address within your program. And then after about 20 hours of training, because our full program is generally around 40 hours total. So, around that midpoint, we may do another assessment because this allows us to document progress thus far and also determine, are there any modifications we need to make? Have we mastered this area and need to work a little bit more on this area? So midway through, we can use this information to adjust the plan. And then, of course, the end goal. Have we reached that destination? Have we strengthened executive function to a point of permanency? So, doing an assessment at the end of your plan for play attention, that would be after about 40 hours of training on the program itself. We want to do another assessment to make certain that we've reached our goals. If we haven't, we know we need to adjust again and keep going. So, assessments are really valuable tools that not only allow us to make the plan, but then also make certain that that plan is working. Now, when we talk about ADHD or weak executive function, as many of you know, attention is just one piece of the puzzle, right? If we just looked back at the list you all posted here, attention's just one piece. You also brought up executive function. You brought up procrastination. You brought up productivity. Memory was brought up, impulse control. So there are so many other pieces of the puzzle we need to assess in order to make complete plan. So we're going to look at two different assessments. One is called focus and the other is called the brief. And we're going to discuss how each assessment works and what we are looking at, what we are able to gain insight on within each assessment. So let's first talk about the brief assessment. The brief, that's an acronym for the Behavior Rating Inventory of Executive Function. So, this is a more subjective assessment. It is based on your experience or your observation. So, it is a series of questions that are online, and it will allow you to assess executive function. The brief assessment is appropriate from any age from 5 all the way up through adulthood. Takes probably about 20 minutes for you to complete. It is, as I said, an online questionnaire that you can do from home or your office. And it is designed to evaluate executive function from multiple perspectives. So let's say that you have an 8-year-old child and you want to assess his executive function from multiple perspectives. So the teacher can complete the brief assessment, and also the parents can complete the brief assessment. And that will give us a really good snapshot of your child's executive function, not only at home, but also in the classroom. If you're an adult, you can do a self-assessment that gives us a good overview of your executive function. If you have a child who is 13 years old or older, they can also do a self-assessment. We do recommend that they're at least 13 when doing a self-assessment. And I think this is really interesting because I had an experience not too long ago with one of our mothers, and she had done a brief assessment for her 15-year-old son. So she filled out the brief assessment, and then she had her 15-year-old son fill out the assessment, the questionnaire on his own. And when we came together and we were looking and reviewing the results, because of course, once we complete the assessments, we need time to review the results. When we reviewed the results, I said, "Did you realize that your observations and your son's observations, the way you evaluated his executive function, were almost identical?" And she was so surprised by that because she said, "I never even realized he knew there was a problem." Right? And that's such an important statement because if you have a teenager right now, you know, a lot of times when you ask, "Is everything okay? Are you struggling anywhere?" And typically the answer is, "No, everything's good. I'm fine." You know, you might not get a lot of information. But when he actually took that brief assessment and was given an opportunity to reflect, we were able to see that he was very aware of the areas where he was struggling. So that really opened the door to a larger conversation where she could have a conversation with him about those different areas and how we could make a plan to improve. So just keep in mind that we can look at the executive function from multiple perspectives, and it will definitely pinpoint not only some of your strengths, but it will also pinpoint the areas where you may struggle. So these are the different areas that the brief assesses, and these areas will look very familiar to you because these are the mental processes within executive function, right? Our final destination. That's why this is a really good assessment to use if our final destination is improved executive function. So inhibit. Let's look at that. Inhibit is that ability to control your impulsive nature. Okay, so we're going to look at impulsivity. Self monitoring, that's your ability to recognize how your behaviors or your actions affect others. Shift, that is that mental flexibility, your ability to transition from a one situation or one task to another. So if you have difficulty with transitions, some of you may see this with your children where transitions are hard. They might be really engaged in a project or maybe a video game, and then you ask them that, they're going to have to clean up and we're going to have dinner in 10 minutes. And then when that 10 minutes is over and they have to transition, if they have difficulty with shift, that area of executive function, then this is where you typically see those emotional breakdowns. They have a hard time shifting from one situation to another. Emotional control. So if you or your child or your clients tend to have really big emotions to things that may seem quite small, that's the inability to regulate your emotions. So we're going to look at that. Initiate. I think it was David who brought up the procrastination. So initiate, being able to start tasks right away and avoid procrastination. We're going to look at that. Our next webinar actually is on procrastination and a new way to look at procrastination. So on January 24th, you may want to attend that as well. Task completion, that's your ability to start and complete in a timely manner. So if you have a hard time with task completion, that's usually, you get to the end of the day and you've been really busy, but you haven't finished anything. So we're going to look at your ability to complete tasks. Working memory. This is really different. A lot of people sometimes confuse short-term memory with working memory. So short-term memory is your ability to take in information and hold that information for about 15 to 30 seconds in order to give a response. So it is, for example, if we were at a conference together and I came up to you and I said, "Hi, my name is Gwen," and you said, "Hi, Gwen," that's an example of short term memory. I gave you information, you gave that information right back to me. So it's short term memory, 15 to 30 seconds, you give me the exact same information. Working memory is a higher level thinking. So it's your ability to take in information, hold that information on your mental sticky note in order to complete a task. So that could be following through with a recipe, right? Being able to read a recipe, remembering it, and following through without having to constantly go back. It also affects reading comprehension. So if you have poor working memory, you may notice that you're rereading a paragraph over and over again in order to be able to remember and summarize. So working memory is really critical. For us as adults, the classic is you walk into a room, you get into that room, and you suddenly have no idea why you're there. You know you came into that room for a reason, but you can't remember why. That's a lapse of working memory. Planning and organizing, of course, that's pretty self-explanatory. Uh, Task monitoring, that's your ability to monitor your work as you're completing a task, and also the organization of materials. So these are the different areas that we're going to look at when we do the brief assessment, and we'll receive a very thorough evaluation. And remember, if you have different people evaluating, we get to see the overall executive function from different perspectives. Uh, Alina says, "Where can I access the brief assessment? My daughter's occupational therapist suggested it to identify needs and goals for my daughter after her brain injury, but I have not found any agency that offers it." We actually offer it, Alina. So if you would like to do the brief assessment with your daughter, just type in brief and we'll make certain that we follow up with you to get your daughter registered. So both assessments that we're reviewing today, the brief and the focus assessment, you can actually do those assessments through us. We'll do the assessment, send you the information on how to do the assessment, and then we need about a 40-minute block of time to actually review the results. Deborah, this is for myself. I will only have a self-assessment. That's absolutely fine. That's perfect. No problem. Okay. All right. So I wanted to give you a couple of examples of the questions within the brief. So these are just two questions regarding working memory. So there'll be several different questions that will look at working memory, and you will respond often, sometimes, never, always. So you get an understanding. I have trouble concentrating on tasks such as chores, reading, or work. The other question is I have trouble with jobs or tasks that have more than one step. So again, you just simply evaluate yourself or your child or your clients or your students throughout, and then we receive a very comprehensive report that allows us to start formulating the plan. So I wanted to give you an example of the results that we'll see. Now, this is a very condensed version of the results because the brief has a very detailed report. So just summarizing the different areas from my student A, we noted that there were concerns on the following scales: inhibit, so that inhibitory control was difficult; shift, emotion control; working memory, planning, and organization. So right away, I know whatever plan we make, whether we're taking the path to the left or the path to the right, whatever plan we put in place, we want to address those 5 areas of executive function. So already I have a lot to work with. Otherwise, the student is doing very well in self-monitoring, initiation, task monitoring, and organization of materials. So now we know where those strengths lie. And this for adults, I often talk to adults where they're having a hard time evaluating what their strengths are. So this is a good way to get a good perspective on some of your strengths that can help you determine maybe a new job opportunity based on your strengths. Okay. Now, the plan of action. So, just what we took from that initial evaluation, if we look at a plan for working memory, because that's one of the areas we know is of concern. We want to work in this one area. So, we're going to look at accommodations, putting accommodations in place, but then also putting in specific cognitive skill training into your play attention plan so that we can simultaneously develop skills. So, the very first plan is to make accommodations. We know that working memory is a difficult area for this student A. So, one of the accommodations that we're going to put into place is that we need to give student A more time to process new information or more time to rehearse new information, because now we know working memory is difficult. So, this is one accommodation we can put into place. Now, it's not enough to just put in an accommodation, right? Because we also have to simultaneously develop skills so that the accommodation is beneficial. So we are going to work on 2 different exercises within play attention. One is auditory processing, which is going to work on developing this person's ability to take in verbal information, hold that information, and then follow through. And then we're also going to incorporate working memory into the plan. Now, there are several different cognitive exercises that we can put into your plan within play attention. And what you want to keep in mind is that no matter what you're working on, whether you're working on auditory processing or working memory or short term memory, whatever exercise you're working on, these exercises are brain enabled, meaning you have to be paying attention in order to activate the activity. If you're not paying attention, then the activity will stop or the character will go in the wrong direction, and you have to focus back in order to continue. And if you have not seen our technology as of yet, I know some of you here have already attended a consultation or maybe a previous webinar, but for those of you who've not seen our technology, this is our brain aware monitoring device. On the back, there are 3 sensors. So during your play attention session, when you're developing skills, you're going to be wearing this body wave armband. And that armband is monitoring your brain activity that tells us how attentive you are. And then that information is given over to the computer where you're allowed to control all of these cognitive exercises just with your mind, or more specifically, your attentive state alone. So that means we have these accommodations in place. Now we're going to start specific skill building. And you can only work on these skills if you are actually paying attention. If you're not paying attention, then the activity will stop or the character will go in the wrong direction. You have to focus back in order to continue. And the reason we do this is because we know the very first catalyst necessary for brain change is attention. You can have a great teacher, you can have a great counselor, but if you're having a hard time paying attention to that process or that individual, it's going to be hard for you to get maximum benefit. So that's why we make certain that no matter what you're working on, you are actively engaged. Okay, so already just from that assessment, this is one little snippet from that assessment, we've started to make a plan of action. Now, that is the brief assessment. So remember, that is the behavior rating inventory of executive function. The focus assessment is a norm reference test of attentional control, and this is objective. So the brief assessment is more subjective based on experience or observation. This is more objective, where it's based on data. It's based on the answers you give on a computerized assessment. And it is 20 minutes. It is appropriate, again, for anyone 5 through adulthood. It's computer based and it measures your capability to pay attention, what to pay attention to, and what not to pay attention to. So it's considered to be a CPT, a continuous performance test. And at the end of the assessment, we receive a report that tells us how you performed compared to the performance of your peers. Okay, so it is a low stimuli task because we want to see how you perform when you're given a low stimuli type of task. And there are 2 types of stimuli that you'll see on the screen. One is a solid star, the other is a star outline. If you see a solid star, you have to push the space bar 1 time as soon as you see it, and only 1 time. If you see a star outline, then you don't push the space bar. And then throughout that 20 minutes, there are distractions that appear, both auditory and visual. It seems simplistic, but it's amazing the results that you'll see in here. And so then we look at 4 different constructs of attention. One is consistency. So consistency is looking at the quality of your response. And performance is looking at the accuracy and the speed of your response. Then we look at impulse control. Of course, that's your ability to control your impulsive responses, and distractions, which is your ability to filter out both auditory and visual distractions. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about what these reports look like. So at the end of that 20 minutes, we receive a full report, which again, we need to have some time to review with you. And if you're doing both the brief and the focus, we're going to combine the 2 and look at the comparison in order to make a full plan and evaluation. So this is Cara, and she's one of our younger students. And you see that this is her result in just the area of consistency. So if you look at that line, the purple line is the norm, with the light purple being areas of concern. Okay. So these are, if you're in the light purple or lower, then this is an area of difficulty. The dark purple is meaning that you are in the better part of the norm. So our goal with Kara, her blue line there is the individual line. So she scored right at 24%, which is a little bit low. Our goal in training is to actually, or our goal, I should say, not only in training, but from our plan of action that we put in place, our goal is to move that consistency to 51% or higher. Because as she ages, that norm group is actually going to shift to the right. So we always want to strive for a higher number. And so whatever plan we put in place, our goal should include the ability to move that blue line, her individual line, to 51% or higher. When we look at consistency, I mentioned that it is the quality of your response. And what does this look like in your day to day? So, if you're lower than the norm in the area of consistency, that typically means that you are having a really hard time starting and completing assignments in a timely manner. So, for example, Cara was having a hard time finishing any type of task within the school setting. So if the teacher gave a little task that should take 15 minutes, she really struggled in order to even complete that task. Or if they sent home a little reading assignment or a few homework uh, homework assignments, those homework assignments that should take 10 or 15 minutes were taking about 2 hours. So it's that ability to start and complete in a timely manner. If you're lower than the norm in the area of consistency, this is typically where you're having a hard time. It also could mean that you notice that one day your son knows his math facts beautifully, and then he goes to school and it's like he's never seen them before. So it's that inconsistency of performance. If you're an adult, you may see these areas in yourself as well, that you have a hard time completing any work assignments unless you're under stress or your work performance is very inconsistent. So we know now that we have to put certain accommodations in place to address consistency, but also skill building. So to help her, because we know that she's having a hard time starting and completing tasks in a timely manner, one of the accommodations we can make is to incorporate short breaks when given an assignment. So whatever assignment we may give her, we're going to incorporate maybe a break every 5 minutes, but the break will only be maybe a minute long. But she knows at least she's going to get that little mini break. And that's going to help her with those longer assignments. And this might be something that you've tried at home with some of your children. Or maybe if you are a counselor or a teacher, you might be trying this with your students. And that's a good accommodation. But again, remember, we have to simultaneously develop skills so that if you're doing a work time, then a little break, and a work time and a little break, we want to develop skills so that work time is really time that they can work and be productive. And in order to make certain the work time is effective work time or productive work time, then we have to help Cara develop her ability to pay attention to low stimuli. So, attention stamina is one of the exercises we're going to put into her program within Play Attention. That's going to teach her how to sustain her attention to low stimuli at will. Time on task is another one. You'll see it has a big star on it. We're going to put that into her program because that's going to teach her how to start and complete in a timely manner. And we're also going to work in academic bridge. Academic bridge is where we're going to have Cara wear the body wave armband while she's doing an assignment. So it could be while you're doing your homework or while you're doing a report for work. And as long as you're paying attention to your report or your reading material, you're going to hear from the computer, good, great. If you start to drift, you'll hear focus, and then you know you're not in that state you need to be in. So, by incorporating attention, stamina, time on task, academic bridge, we're developing skills that she needs in order for that accommodation to make sense and for the order for that accommodation to be truly beneficial. Because now during her work time, she's going to be more productive, and then we're going to give her a little break. And then over time, of course, we want to move to a point where she no longer needs those accommodations. I hope that makes sense for everyone because I know that accommodations are a big part of especially your school program. So you may have a child in school, and one of the accommodations that they've given him is longer test time, and that's a good accommodation. However, we also have to have skill building because if we're not simultaneously helping your child with his ability to sustain his attention and to stay on task and to filter distractions and to control his impulsivity, then longer test time just ends up being longer time to daydream or be off task. So we have to make certain that the accommodations are there, but we're simultaneously developing skills. So again, this helps us really make a complete plan of action. So we're going to put those accommodations in place, but then simultaneously develop specific skills that you need in order to reach your goal, which of course is that end goal of improved executive function. And although you don't see those mental processes here, you don't see emotion regulation, you don't see organization, all of those areas of executive function, you have to think those foundational skills that you need in order to be more organized, in order to control your emotions, those are all here. So if you think about emotion regulation, if your brief comes back and it says that we need to address emotion regulation, then there are certain skills we need to work on in order to improve emotion regulation. Because in order for you to improve your emotion regulation, you have to be able to sustain your attention to the entire situation. You have to process that information. You have to control your impulsive nature to just impulsively respond with that first emotion that comes to mind. We also have to deal with working memory or improve working memory so that you can draw on previous experiences. And we should also work on mindfulness so that you're able to stay in the present moment. So, in order to improve that one process within executive function, we need to work on attention, impulse control, mindfulness, processing speed, and memory. And all of those skills you're going to work on in every single session. So remember, now we talked about the plan. The plan is to put some accommodations in place and simultaneously do that skill building. And then we have to make certain that you reached your final destination. So you do that assessment or the assessments in the beginning of your plan, and then mid plan to make any adjustments. And then again, when we're about to graduate, we should make certain before you stop your plan that you have reached your final destination. So let's look at what the post evaluation looks like. In the area of consistency, remember when we looked at the pre evaluation with Cara, she was at 24% attendance. 24% consistency. At the end evaluation, she scored at 88%. Our goal was 59, and then notice that it did shift because she got a little bit older, so it did shift to 62%. So our end goal was to 62% or higher, and we got to that 88%. So what does that look like in the classroom? Well, now she's able to start and complete assignments in a timely manner. She's able to learn new facts and remember them from day to day. So we did reach our final destination there. And we can see it not only in the classroom and at home, but we also see it here in this evaluation. I also wanted to share her pre and post impulse control with you. So, consistency is considered to be a positive construct. So, the higher the number, the better. Whereas impulse control or impulsivity is considered to be a negative construct. So, the lower the number, the better. So, she was 88% impulsive on her focus assessment. So, very impulsive. And through training, our goal, of course, was to get her below 14%. And through training, when we did the post evaluation, she was at 1%. And that's really significant. And we see this huge change in impulse control, usually about midway through training. So that's really important because within play attention, especially, we incorporate impulse control in all of the intermediate and advanced skill options in every single cognitive skill area. So, this is really interesting. We often see high impulsivity, but you can make significant gains in those areas. So, again, did we reach that destination? Yes, we can actually document that we have reached the final destination. Improved impulse control, improved consistency. And of course, we can also do a post evaluation on the brief assessment to make certain everything's transferred and generalized and executive function is going very well in all areas. So I hope this gives you an idea and really allows you to maybe look at assessments in a different light. Consider taking assessments to evaluate not only your weaknesses, but also pinpoint some of your strengths. And it's really important that we use this information to choose a path, to design a program, to make a plan so that you can reach your goals. That should always be part of the assessment objective. Because I talk to so many parents who will say, we did a neuropsych evaluation and I have a lot of information. I have 23 pages of information on the different areas that were assessed and where the weaknesses lie. But that's all I have. I just have information. I don't have a plan. So, what do we do? So, your assessment should be that starting point. We can pinpoint the areas, we can recognize which areas are most severe, and then make a positive plan of action. Thank you so much, everyone. It was a pleasure, and I hope you have a great afternoon.